Welcome to My Hometown, the program that explores clubs, organizations, businesses, and issues across Nassau and Suffolk counties and sheds light on the different towns that are making a difference.
Hello and welcome to My Hometown. I'm Bill Horan, along with my co-host, Nassau Community College student, Stacy Raine.
Now entering the courtroom is today's guest.
This is a studio, Stacy, not a courtroom.
Come on, play along, Bill. Now entering the courtroom is today's guest, Ms. Enza Brandi of the Enza Brandi Law Firm.
You'd make a good judge, Stacy.
You think? I always thought I'd be a good defense attorney.
Either way, today we're going to learn a lot about a local law business here on Long Island that concentrates in the areas of real estate, personal injury, and commercial litigation.
Enza, welcome to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Enza, tell us a little bit about your practice and why did you decide to become a lawyer?
Well, first I want to thank you both for having me here on this show. Stacy, it's a pleasure to meet you, and Bill, an old friend, it's a pleasure to see you always.
Thank you.
Anyway, I decided to become a lawyer. I grew up in Ozone Park in Queens. My father was born in Italy. My grandfather and my grandmother's parents were born in Italy. They came here with the typical American dream, to work hard, buy a house, which my grandfather did. And my uncle, who was the youngest of my mother's siblings, became a lawyer. I lived upstairs from him. He lived downstairs. And he was kind of my hero and my role model. And I would see him coming back from school with the books and in his room studying, and I was just fascinated. And as a matter of fact, I spoke with him on my way in today, and he is
let's
still
give him
my
a shout out.
inspiration.
What's his name?
Robert Morocco.
Okay, there you go.
Amazing attorney.
And as the time went on, obviously you went to law school, and what made you concentrate in certain areas of law?
Well, my first job out of school was in a very large personal injury firm in Queens. We handled a great volume of cases. So I got experience early on in being sent into court, as opposed to, some larger firms or some more boutique firms where the new law students or the new law associates would be doing paperwork. We were actually given files and sent out to court. And that, to me, I caught the bug. I caught the bug with that.
They threw you into the fire quickly.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. And, it turned out it was scary at the time as a new lawyer, but it was, learning under fire, and, wonderful experience.
Sounds like tons of fun. I'm really interested. So you do a lot of different types of law, but I'm interested, particularly I want to talk about the personal injury law. I have a friend who was just in a car wreck, actually, and somebody just, slammed into her. So it wasn't her fault. It was definitely the other person's fault. I asked if the person was drinking. She didn't know. The cops were involved, that kind of thing. So, I would love to know from you, how often does this type of thing happen and they come to you and say, I was in a big car wreck and I need your help?
Well, motor vehicle accidents are the primary, the biggest area of the personal injury cases. They're more common than the slip and fall accidents. And the labor law, we do a lot of labor law as well, meaning people on job sites who fall from ladders, fall from scaffolds. We do a great deal of that work as well. But car accidents are by far the most prevalent. And I'm sorry, first of all, I'm sorry to hear about your friend, and I hope she's okay. So, what's important about the car accident cases is, sometimes there are witnesses at the scene, and, unfortunately, they're not always noted on police reports. So, it's important for people at the scene of a car accident, and I know if you're involved in an accident, you don't have the wherewithal to think about this, but but also often people call a friend, a husband, a mom and dad to come to the scene. If there's somebody there who could take pictures of the other vehicle's car damage, get witness names and contact information, things like that are very helpful in the investigation, because I have a recent very interesting case that is the first time this has happened in 30 years, where my client's rendition of how this accident happened is completely supported by the area of damage on his vehicle. He says he was almost through an intersection and someone came around a turn and hit him in the rear. in the passenger side quarter panel by the wheel well. But 3 witnesses and the police report have a completely different version of the accident. And it's mind-boggling to me because I myself went to the body shop to see this vehicle and take pictures of the damage. And it's completely, the areas of damage completely support my client's version of what happened. And I also spoke to the witnesses who say it's completely my client's fault. I've never had this happen before. So in that respect, as much information as somebody can get when they have a car accident or any kind of accident is critically important or can be critically important.
That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.
And so when we go to a doctor, we think of someone who works on the eye, ear, nose, or throat. Other doctors specialize in knees and ankles, etc. Is it that way with an attorney? Even in the negligence field, do some specialize in certain types of injuries or car accidents as opposed to a slip and fall or as opposed to maybe getting hit by something that falls off a truck?
No, not necessarily, Bill. Most attorneys who do personal injury will handle all types of cases like we do. Like I said, we certainly do slip and fall accidents. We do motor vehicle accidents, which are the most common, and we do a fair number of labor law cases, which are also very significant cases.
Stacy, I mentioned before the show, and we were talking about this, Enza and I used to work in the same office building. We were about 30 yards apart, our offices, so we interacted several times during the day. And one time I remember, I think it was a Thursday morning, I went in, she had this loose leaf book packed with papers. I said, "What's that for?" And I kind of knew what it was, but I just didn't expect to see it. And she said, "Oh, that's my trial book." I said, "You have a trial book?" And lawyers have that when they're going to trial with all their information in. I said, "What kind of case is this?" And then she told me, and it was a relatively small in terms of monetary value case, which most attorneys wouldn't go to all that trouble, but she did. When I saw that trial book, I said, if I was the other attorney, I would settle this case quickly. And as Enza remembers, and we've talked about it often, she was back in the office by 12 o'clock that day. I said, "What happened?" She said, "Oh, the other attorney said, we're going to settle. I'll call you Monday and we'll reach an agreement." And I think that's the way it worked out, because when he saw this trial book, he knew he was in for a full trial. He knew she was well prepared. And, of course, the client was the one who benefited because they got the top value for the case, even though it was a small one. And you just had to do a lot of extra work. That's all, right?
Well, Bill, you know what? There's no such thing as a small client. All our clients are important to us. All their cases are important to them, and we appreciate that.
And I know when you say it, it's the truth, because I saw that case. So you're definitely not just hyping it. You're telling the truth.
If something happens, they have a personal injury, and they call you. What's the typical consultation like? What do you do with a new client that calls?
Well, of course, we get their personal information. The date of birth, their address, et cetera, and we garner as much information from them as we can. Again, if it's a motor vehicle accident case, we set up what they call a no-fault file, which is a provision through their own policy that pays for their medical treatment, could pay for transportation to and from the doctor, some household care, and that's called no fault because regardless of fault, even if they are completely not at fault for that accident, it still gets paid through their own insurance. And as an aside, it's important if you have, if people have greater than a minimal policy of the 2550 that's required in New York. If you have greater than that minimum coverage, take a look at your no-fault policy and your SUM, that's uninsured, underinsured provisions, and make sure that those are also increased. Mm-hmm. Because what those provisions do, no fault, again, covers you if you're in an accident for your medical treatment. If, God forbid, you get hospitalized, that $50,000 can be used up immediately.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. And with the SUM, if you're in an accident with an uninsured driver or somebody that doesn't have sufficient insurance to cover you, you have to have greater than that policy to access that. So you can get additional coverage for your damages, for your injuries from your own policy. And often the insurers don't advise their clients about that because it's money coming out of that insurance company.
Yeah, that actually happened to me when I was a teenager. So I was glad to have that coverage, or my friend had that coverage. I want to quickly remind our listeners that you are listening to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Stacy Raine, here with Bill Horan, and today we're learning about a Long Island law firm and what everyone needs to know about law, but we're afraid to ask. Our guest today is Enza Brandi from the Enza Brandi Law Firm. So you mentioned no fault, and you said that you need that insurance to kick in. So that doesn't automatically happen when you get hurt?
Everybody has a minimal coverage of $25.50, meaning $25,000 per claim and $50,000 per incident. Mm-hmm. So if there are 4 people in a vehicle and they all get hurt, there's $50,000 maximum for
everyone.
Well, that's the liability policy. There's $50,000 available for medical insurance, or medical treatment, rather. So if if you have a more significant injury, you may need more treatment than the $50,000 allows. Mm-hmm. It's important to have a higher coverage under your no fault.
So if I walk away from a car wreck and give the police statement and go to the hospital, does insurance automatically happen, or do I need to come to a lawyer?
Well, you need to advise the hospital that it is a motor vehicle accident, and they often do ask for your insurance card, but we as the attorneys will send out a document called an NF5 to these hospitals to make sure
it's
billing
happening
correctly.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
You see, there's a lot of little small things, and I'm learning them listening to you talk about these incidents along the way, what you have to do in light of a case. But let me throw this out. Someone has an accident, and most of us are procrastinators. Are there time limits people should be aware of, that if they had a car accident or they walked into a store and slipped or were hurt by some machinery in the store, are there time limits that affect them?
Absolutely there are. Well, first of all, the no-fault application has to be filed within 30 days to be effective.
1 month, 30 days, wow.
Okay. It used to be 90 days, but the carriers, in order to limit their payments and exposure, lowered it to a 30-day time frame so that they can have their doctors examine you and determine that you don't need more treatment. It saved them money in medical bills. But with slip and falls and motor vehicle accidents, there could be notice of claim requirements.
What is a notice? What does that mean?
A notice of claim is a document that needs to be filed or served upon municipalities if there's an accident. So if you slip at a train station or in a public library or a public school, there would be a notice of claim requirement. You are required to put that municipality on notice of your claim within 90 days. And the document has to be very specific.
Yeah. So 90 days isn't a lot of time. I mean, when you come down to this kind of thing, someone slips and falls, they hurt their back, they go to the hospital or some injury, 2-3 weeks passes, and they say, maybe I should see a lawyer, and they call you and you're on trial, and they get you the next month. So 30 days is already gone, and that's time we didn't even notice. And then you have to file, the lawyer, have to file the papers within 90 days?
Within 90 days, so yes. They have to be served on the municipality.
We better get going on those cases.
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely. And sometimes there's investigation that needs to be done, particularly with slip and fall accidents, because if the notice is not specific enough, the municipality can then move to dismiss the case based on the fact that they weren't properly noticed under the general municipal law and the requirements of the general municipal law. So if it's not done properly, and a lot of times people will slip and fall on a street corner or, in front of a building and they don't know exactly where it happened. And that's not sufficient to just give an address. It has to have some kind of measurement from a landmark, from the mailbox, from the curb. It needs to have specificity enough so that municipality can pinpoint the area of the fall.
Well, I'm thinking we want to have that happen fast, because if it's hurt someone, you certainly don't want it to hurt another person after that. We want them to fix it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And even for that person's case, again, and these municipalities sometimes will move to dismiss later on in the litigation. So, that's important. And, early investigation can be critical as far as a case.
And I'm just thinking today, that perhaps the good thing is most of us have a cell phone. If something happens, take a picture.
Absolutely. Take a picture.
And
take a
many
picture.
As you can, right?
If it's a car accident, you can always get pictures of your own vehicle damage, but not necessarily of the other one. Like I said, that one case that is absolutely mind-boggling, in 30 years of practicing law, I've never had this happen, And unfortunately, my client was very severely hurt in an accident where he now has 3 witnesses and a police report that seem to make this accident his fault, where the point of impact on the vehicle is completely contradictory. And I've never had that happen. Certainly, he was not in any position to take photos at the scene because he was hurt. But again, everybody's got a cell phone, and a lot of times, you pick up the phone, you call your mother or your father, you call your husband or your wife or your best friend, and somebody can come to the scene of the accident and help you out with that.
Yeah, seems like something you definitely want to do and that sounds like it's going to be a really interesting case.
Yeah, it's sad. It's sad, and again, it's a head scratcher because I can't comprehend how we have such a contradiction.
Right. You have 30 years of experience, so I'm betting you have some really successful outcomes for clients. And do you want to share a couple of notable ones with us?
Well, actually, we just did an appeal. I also, do some appellate work, with my own cases. We had a labor law case. Labor law cases are significant because, it makes a case much stronger than a common law negligence case if you can fall under the parameters of a labor law case. So labor law cases where, as it pertains to falls from elevation, scaffolds, ladders, that kind of thing makes for a much stronger case. But the law itself requires that in order to fall under the ambit of the labor law, you have to be performing a certain type of work, and it's specifically defined. Painting, pointing, demolition, construction, and routine maintenance is not considered an activity that is covered. So we just recently had a case that was dismissed on a motion as far as on the question of whether this was a labor law case. And, my clients, the negligence case stayed, but the labor law case got dismissed. We took it up on appeal, and we just won that appeal, which, makes the case significantly stronger. That's one of them. We've had other types of interesting labor law cases, and often that question comes up. So again, we go back to investigation and all preliminary steps being very important as far as how the accident happened, what was being done, at the time of the accident.
Stacy, that's a big accolade. I'm just listening to Enza says it so easily, but when you win on appeal, you're essentially saying that the lower court was incorrect. Right. And the appellate court, as we go up, the appellate courts are the highest, saying you're correct.
Right.
So we'll applaud for you because you're the winner in that case. Okay. But you said it so easily, and I'm thinking, did I hear that right? And not obviously there has to be a winner on each side, but it's nice that it's your client and somebody who came to you is going to do well on it.
Yeah. And in fact, the way they conduct the appeals these days, like a lot of things, you can appear personally if you choose to do that. You can just have your appellate brief submitted and read by judges without doing an oral argument. And I always opt to go into court because I feel it's an honor to be before that panel.
And you like to talk, we know.
Don't all lawyers.
Any crazy cases that, without telling us names, et cetera, but things that come back to you in the negligence world that really just a little wacky?
Well, this one that I had talked about is a little wacky, but certainly not in a good way because it's hard to explain to my client the difficulty here. And and what's amazing is when I speak to the insurance carriers on that particular case, I keep talking about it because it's a recent case and it's an important client because he is injured. He's significantly injured. When I talk about the case, is these insurance carriers have this assumption that because one of the witnesses is a volunteer fireman, that his word is more credible, but where you have witnesses stacked against one person who's involved, it's just very difficult. That's a rough situation.
I want to take a minute to remind our listeners that you are listening to My Hometown on the Voice of Nassau Community College. 90.3 WHPC. My name is Stacy Raine, here with Bill Horan, and today we're learning about a Long Island law firm and what everyone needs to know about law, but we're afraid to ask. Our guest today is Enza Brandi from the Enza Brandi Law Firm.
That sounds like a great book that Enza should write, what everybody needs to know about law, but they were afraid to ask. That in your spare time. We know you have a lot of free time. You're not busy.
Yeah, no, of course not.
Now, we're hearing a lot today about the real estate market. Can you tell us something about that? That's the field that you also practice in.
Yes, we do.
And
yes, we do.
what should our audience know about that, be alert to what's happening?
Okay, well, I don't think it's any secret that this is a very tough real estate market on Long Island because there is very little inventory, very little houses for sale. So even though the interest rates have increased significantly, a couple of years ago, people were getting 2.9% interest rates on mortgages that are now, almost every deal I close has prepaid points to pay down the interest rates, and they're still getting, close to 7% with the prepaid points, which means any buyers going out there looking for houses are going to have a really tough time. I'm hearing, I've read several articles that say, hey, buy the houses now because this market's not going to break anytime soon. Nobody knows. Nobody can predict. But I represent buyers and sellers. I also represent lenders. So, anybody looking for a house out there, I have wonderful, wonderful loan officers that I work with. And certainly don't give up. You get a good real estate broker. You find the right house. We are here to help. And we also do a very thorough job with our real estate cases, real estate deals. The first thing we do is we look at the house. Mm-hmm. We look to see if there are any CO issues.
What's a CO issue? What does that mean?
Certificates of occupancy are issued by the townships for any kind of, certain kinds of improvements on the house, such as if you put in a pool, if you put on a deck, if you put an addition to your house. Many structures require filing permits and then ultimately an inspection to get legalized, so they get
and
issued.
People either forget those or they don't do them because it saves them tax money, right?
Right,
okay.
Absolutely. Or sometimes people have a deck built and they assume that the builder's going to legalize it. Or they buy a house that already has a deck and they say to me, well, the deck was there when I bought it, but that doesn't always mean that they had the proper COs in place. So times like that, that's the first thing we do. Unfortunately, in this market, a lot of buyers are being told, take it or leave it. Mm-hmm. A lot of sellers are saying, yeah, we don't have a CO for this deck or this addition, or this finished basement, but we're not going to get it. And, and that requires a conversation with my client, whether it's a buyer or seller, and, to make sure that they're aware of what they're buying.
And what happens if you don't have the CO? What does that really mean?
Well, it means that there's a potential for the town to come back and require you to file it, which is going to be an expense to you as a buyer. And depending on the structure, like if I see a second-story deck without a CO, that to me is a big red flag because that's a potential safety issue. Yeah. A lot of
built it,
Exactly. If it's not built in compliance with regulations, you don't want a second-story deck.
Yeah, I know builders need to be, licensed and all that kind of stuff. So you want to make sure they know what they're doing when they're building a high-up structure, right?
And Stacey, I would think, and that if you find something out later, in other words, something might have been built 5 years ago, but if nothing has been done to legalize it, and if it does take some work, now you have to go backwards. It's already it's structure standing there. Take it apart and do it the right way because for some reason they didn't get it originally. Is that
right? There may need renovations in order to come into compliance. I've seen it very often. A deck has to get additional footers put on, or other renovations to bring it into compliance. Mm-hmm. That's something that a buyer in this market has to kind of weigh if they want a house, because as I said, it is now a seller's market. Mm-hmm. And a lot of sellers are taking that position. Markets change all the time, so when it's a buyer's market, the buyers are more in the driver's seat. They can insist on certain things being in compliance.
So as a lawyer, she has to know construction also? And
I know, it sounds like it.
Not enough just to know the law. You have to know, is this strong? Am I going to fall off the roof? What's going to happen?
I'm not sure if she ever sleeps. It sounds like she just does nothing but work.
Actually, I don't.
There you go. See, I knew you had a secret.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to sell my home from a legal perspective, what would you tell me? Well, what do I need to know?
Well, I would ask you about COs on your home because if I'm representing you as a seller and you tell me I have a finished basement with a bathroom in it and I don't have a CO, I need to make sure that it's specified in the contract that this is how you're getting the house. Or, if you've agreed to get the COs, then you have to understand what your obligations are in that respect. Certainly everything that you want to take, if you want to take chandeliers or other fixtures, that also has to be specified. I have some people who, they want the chandelier because it came from their mother's house or whatever the case is, something like that has to be in there. And timing is critical, because often people are buying and selling, and a lot of people, unfortunately, moving out of New York.
Oh.
So New York State, as Bill knows because he practiced in real estate law, we have a very loose time frame as far as closings here in New York. They're on or about dates, which give a 30-day leeway, but not every state does. Mm-hmm. So if I have a client selling here in New York and buying in Florida where they have actual drop-dead closing dates, if you don't make that closing date, you could be deemed to be in default and lose your down payment in the house.
Mm.
And that's a lot of money here in New York, usually $40,000, $50,000, $100,000, 10%.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, and Florida has gone up with their market as well. So, people, and that makes coordination a little difficult. So, those kind of questions have to be asked right up front to make sure that we're moving at a pace that's reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Enza, before we wrap up today's interview, if someone is hearing what you're talking about, C of O's, negligence cases, and they want some more information, first of all, I know you just moved your office. Where can they find you, and is there a website where they can learn more? Okay, well, we actually just bought a building at 310 West Hills Road, right by Whitman High School. Beautiful building. And that's in Huntington?
That's in Huntington,
okay.
Yes.
And your website? And
the website is enzabrandilaw.com, and we encourage all our listeners to visit that website.
And Brandi is spelled Brandi.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Easy enough to remember. And if you want some good advice, you know who to call.
Thank you, Bill.
We want to thank you for being with us today, and we want to remind our audience that you've been listening to Enza Brandi from the Enza Brandi Law Firm. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Bill. Thank you both.
I'm Bill Horan. I'm here with Nassau Community College student Stacy Raine. We thank you for listening to this week's episode of My Hometown.
We like to get your feedback on My Hometown. Send your comments to whpc@ncc.edu. Nassau Community College, where success starts and continues. Till next time, this is Bill St. James. And remember, there's no town like your hometown.